Good day, fellow Planeteers. Welcome back to Passport Planet, a channel all about the VIP. This video is part 2 of the series regarding birthplace on passports. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, click the upper right and go to that. I strongly recommend watching it before starting this one. During the last episode, we talked about the fact that the place of birth is not mandatory on passports and many countries don't have it on their travel documents. However, if you remember what started this whole series, which was the option to hide your birthplace on the Canadian passport, then you'll know that the Canadian government actually puts out several warnings to discourage people from doing it. Our last video basically debunked the third one. As I've said, it's not a requirement according to the international standards. Many countries don't put it on their passports, and so far I have never heard of anyone being denied entry just because their place of birth wasn't written on their passports. There's no news article that reports anyone being denied entry for not having that info on their passports either, despite my best effort to find it. Therefore, we can safely say that the third warning is almost 100% false, because obviously not a single country in the world cares about where you're born. If you still need more convincing, then let me point to 2 other things to reinforce my point. Enhanced driver's license and Nexus card. These 2 IDs are the most popular travel documents Canadians use when visiting America, besides their passports, of course. For those who didn't know, aside from their passports, Canadians can also use a number of other travel documents to enter the United States. The enhanced driver's license is one of them. It's essentially a more expensive version of the driver's license issued in certain provinces that allows Canadian citizens to hop over to the south without a passport. It's convenient because it's a wallet-sized card that you can bring around with you at all times. The limitations are that it's only available to Canadian citizens, and it can only be used when crossing over via the land borders or seaports. For non-Canadians living in Canada, they can apply for a Nexus card to travel between the 2 countries, as long as they have lived in Canada for 3 years. The Nexus card not only allows you to travel without a passport by sea, land, and air, it also grants access to fast lanes at the border and in the airports. But what's more important is that neither the enhanced driver's license nor the Nexus card has your place of birth written on it. So why do you need it on your passport again? But I digress. Now, some might still say that the case for enhanced driver's license and Nexus card are different. If people are used to seeing passports with place of birth, then they will look twice if they run into one without it. I've already addressed this point in my previous video. My argument was that almost nobody actually looks at passports nowadays, and even if they do, it's not a big deal. Which brings us back to the second warning. What if they find it strange that you don't have place of birth on your passport? Wouldn't that cause delay at the border? I wish I could answer that question. Unfortunately, I can't, and neither could anyone on Earth. Because in order to determine if omitting that information would cause delay, we will need to run a large-scale controlled experiment with the full endorsement and cooperation from multiple countries' governments, so that we'll know, for example, if you omit that info, then your probability of going into secondary processing will increase by this much, and the time spent at this particular border crossing will increase by that much. Such experiment is impossible because 1, no government will be willing to spend any resources on such frivolous things as missing birthplace, which is self-evidence that they don't care about this, and 2, the number of factors that need to be controlled are too many. The passport bearer's race, ethnicity, accent, age, name, the location of the border crossing, the time of the day, the border officials' own biases, these are all playing into whether you might get stopped at the border or not, since the officers usually have full discretion to do whatever they want, and they will never tell you why they pulled you into the back room, which is also why I don't rely on anecdotes, because it's all guesswork. And without the scientific data from such experiment, we cannot assume that hiding the place of birth will cause trouble at the border. I'm not saying that my argument is 100% correct. My mind is open towards any evidence that can prove me wrong. For example, if you can find a manual of operation for the border forces that says if the officer sees a Canadian passport without a place of birth, then hold that person for further questioning or something like that, then I'll say that's actually pretty good evidence and I'll keep that in mind in the future. But as things stand right now, I don't have evidence that suggests otherwise. Which brings us to warning number 1. Again, we don't have any data that suggests passports missing the place of birth have higher visa refusal rates. We just don't. On top of that, most countries never reveal the real reason for denying visa, so you have no idea how missing the place of birth plays into it. Now, in some cases, the place of birth is important. For example, it's well known that you need to provide it when applying for a Chinese visa. But it doesn't mean you have to show it on your passport. Remember on the last episode, we mentioned that the South Korean passport doesn't have the bearer's birthplace? So, do you suppose no South Koreans can get a Chinese visa? Of course not. Plenty of Koreans go to China for business and tourism all the time. If you hold a passport that doesn't have the place of birth information, you simply need to supply another document that has it. Usually it's a copy of the birth certificate. And that's really it. It's not complicated at all. In summary, none of these warnings is substantiated with strong evidence. It's your choice to make. My position has always been that you don't have to be afraid to do it. Why would someone want to hide their birthplace? The simple answer is none of your business. But hey, let's be nice here. There are actually some very good reasons. Before getting into that, don't forget to subscribe and like if you want to hear more professional opinions in the future. Going back to the Chinese visa, we all know that the Chinese government is extremely sensitive towards this sensitive spot, so it will not surprise you that China refuses to issue visas to Canadians who were born in Hong Kong, Macau, or Taiwan without declaring that these places belong to China on their passport first. For example, if you are a Canadian born in Taipei City in Taiwan and the birthplace on your Canadian passport is written as Taipei TWN, then you'll be refused a Chinese visa unless you change the place of birth into Taipei, China. Some might say, well, just change it then. It's not that simple. First of all, changing it is making a compelled political statement. Not everyone agrees with China on these issues. Secondly, changing it will cause conflict with the information on your birth certificate, which leads to more troubles in the future. And thirdly, changing your birthplace to China might be disadvantageous in some circumstances. For example, when you apply for certain American visas, your eligibility and position in the queue is determined by your place of birth. Thus, putting yourself in the same pool of millions of other Chinese will definitely be problematic. Instead of changing your place of birth, you might want to consider hiding that info, at least partially, since apparently it works.
We have been informed anecdotally that applicants with Hong Kong, Macau, or any city in Taiwan as their city of birth, without specifying their country of birth, have been granted visas.
Now, because of all these, nowadays, when a Hong Kong, Macau, or Taiwanese-born Canadian applies for his passport, by default, he gets a passport that only shows the city name without country. The same goes for anyone born in Jerusalem, with only city name, no country, just to avoid a controversy. Another valid reason for you to omit your place of birth is if you're born in the United States. Everyone knows that American citizens, no matter where they live, have to report their taxes back to the federal government. And banks all around the world are obligated to report account activities of Americans as well. This is why when you open a bank account, they often ask you if you have US citizenship. Of course, you can just say no if you're not, but things get tricky if you're born in America, because then people assume you are a citizen of the United States because everyone knows about the American birthright citizenship. This is super unfair because you could have already renounced your American citizenship, or you might be born to diplomats working in the US, which means you're not entitled to birthright citizenship. But most bank tellers don't care. They see on your passport that your birthplace is USA and they'll report you to Uncle Sam. You could show them your renunciation certificate or your parents' old diplomatic passports to prove your innocence, for lack of better words, but then it takes weeks for the banks to verify the information, not to mention sometimes you need to get the documents translated, certified, and notarized, which could take months. Instead of going through all that, why not just opt out from showing your birthplace so that you don't have to deal with any of this? Of course, if you do still have American citizenship, then you should be honest and do what's legally required. But if you don't, then it makes sense to hide it on your passport so that you can save yourself a lot of hassle when doing your finances. Again, this video is not immigration advice. Do your own research and make your own decision. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.